Daniel Carter had grown used to quiet nights at the small family diner on Main Street, a place that had become a second home for him and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, since the loss of his wife 3 years earlier, but this evening carried a strange heaviness he couldn't ignore. As soon as they walked in, Daniel noticed that the usual cheerful hum of laughter and clinking plates was replaced with a nervous tension that seemed to hang in the air, and at the center of it all was Emma, the young waitress who often served them with a bright smile and gentle voice, though tonight she looked different, her eyes puffy as if she had been crying, her hands trembling slightly as she balanced a tray, her forced smile unable to hide the strain on her face. Daniel guided Lily to their favorite booth by the window, his fatherly instincts on high alert, because over the years he had developed a knack for reading people, especially since Lily relied on him for everything, and he could see in Emma's face the weight of something wrong pressing down on her. As Emma placed menus on their table, Daniel caught the faint glisten of tears in her eyes, and though she quickly turned away to tend to another group of customers, he couldn't shake the unease that followed. Lily, ever perceptive for her age, tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, why does Miss Emma look so sad?" Daniel gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and murmured, "Sometimes people are having a hard day, sweetheart, but we can be kind and maybe help make it better," though deep down he suspected kindness alone might not be enough tonight. From across the diner, the sound of raised voices suddenly cut through the chatter. 2 men at the far corner booth were grumbling loudly, their tones sharp with irritation as they pushed their plates away in frustration, and Emma, shoulders tense, hurried to their table to try to calm them down. Daniel watched carefully, noting how the men's voices grew louder with every word, drawing the attention of other diners who glanced over briefly before quickly looking away, unwilling to get involved. The men accused Emma of messing up their order, though Daniel could see she was apologizing repeatedly, promising to fix it, her voice shaking as she tried to appease them. His jaw tightened as he saw one of the men point a finger at her, his face red with anger, and Emma's head bowed as if she were shrinking under the weight of his hostility. Daniel hated bullies in any form, and he could already feel a knot of protectiveness building in his chest. Lily leaned closer, her voice small and worried, "Daddy, they're being mean to her." Daniel nodded slightly, his eyes locked on the scene, silently promising his daughter that if things escalated, he would not sit by and watch. For now, he stayed seated, his posture calm but alert, knowing that moments like this had a way of turning ugly fast, and though he had only come for a simple dinner with his daughter, Daniel sensed that before the night was over, he would have to make a choice that could change everything. The tension in the diner thickened as the 2 men's complaints grew louder, their frustration echoing off the tiled walls until it felt like every eye in the room was glued to their corner, and Emma, still trying to remain professional, apologized again and promised to bring them a fresh order, but her trembling voice betrayed her fear, and Daniel could feel his daughter Lily shrinking into his side, her small fingers clutching his arm as though she too sensed the danger brewing. One of the men suddenly slammed his fist against the table, making silverware rattle and cups jump, his anger rising like a storm, and with a sneer he called Emma names that made several customers gasp and shake their heads, yet no one moved to intervene, their silence speaking volumes about how easy it was to turn away when someone else was suffering, but Daniel wasn't built that way. And the sight of Emma biting her lip as she fought back tears stirred something fierce inside him, the same instinct that had carried him through years of raising Lily alone, the instinct to protect, no matter the cost. Emma tried to set down the corrected plates with a shaky smile, whispering that she hoped everything was right this time, but one of the men shoved his dish back at her with enough force that it toppled onto the floor, shattering into pieces and splattering food across her apron. The sound of breaking porcelain rang like a gunshot, drawing a hush over the diner, and Emma froze, staring down at the shards as her shoulders shook, her tears finally slipping free, humiliation washing over her in waves while the men laughed cruelly, their voices dripping with disdain. Daniel could feel his heart pounding in his chest, every muscle in his body coiled with the urge to act, and when Lily whispered again, "Daddy, do something," he knew the time for sitting still was over. He slid out of the booth, his tall frame rising with quiet authority, and walked across the room with a steady stride, each step fueled by the image of Emma crouched on the floor, trying to clean up while her dignity crumbled under the weight of ridicule. Standing in front of the men, Daniel's voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge as he said, "That's enough," and the room seemed to still at his words, The men looked up at him with surprise before one sneered, "Mind your own business," but Daniel's eyes didn't waver, his presence towering over them like an unmovable wall, and he replied firmly, "She's doing her job. You don't get to treat her this way." Emma looked up at him through tear-filled eyes, her breath hitching as relief flickered across her face, because for the first time that night someone had stood up for her, someone who refused to let cruelty go unchecked, and though Daniel hadn't come to the diner looking for a fight, he knew he had just stepped into one that would test more than his strength, it would test his resolve to be the kind of man his daughter believed he was. The diner seemed to shrink around them as Daniel stood tall between Emma and the two furious men, his steady posture radiating quiet strength, and though he had no interest in fighting, his protective instincts surged like a shield, making it clear he wasn't going to let things escalate further without standing his ground. The taller of the two men shoved back his chair with a screech, rising to his feet and towering close to Daniel as he sneered, "You think you're some kind of hero? She messed up our food, she deserved it," but Daniel's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he replied in a calm, firm tone, "No one deserves to be treated like that, least of all someone just trying to do her job," and his voice carried with such authority that nearby customers, who had been nervously pretending not to watch, turned in their seats, some even holding their breaths, as if waiting for a spark to ignite the powder keg of tension hanging in the air. Emma stood behind Daniel, her hands pressed against her apron, her breathing quick and shallow, yet her gaze locked on his broad shoulders as though she found safety in the way he placed himself between her and the storm, and for the first time that night, her tears slowed, replaced with a flicker of hope that maybe she wasn't alone after all. The second man, stockier and red-faced from drink, jabbed a finger at Daniel's chest and barked, "You got no business stepping in here, pal. This is between us and her," but Daniel didn't flinch, didn't even blink, instead shifting slightly so his body continued to shield Emma as he said firmly, "The second you humiliate someone in public, it's everyone's business. If you've got a problem, you take it up with the manager, not by bullying a young woman half your size." His words struck hard, carrying the weight of truth, but pride and alcohol made the men reckless. The taller one suddenly shoved Daniel's shoulder, testing him, and in a flash, Daniel's hand shot up, gripping the man's wrist and twisting just enough to send a jolt of pain through his arm without causing real harm, a controlled move born of countless hours of self-defense classes he had taken after becoming a single father, determined to always protect himself and Lily. The man winced and cursed, trying to pull free, but Daniel's grip was steady as steel, and he leaned in slightly, his voice low and edged with warning, "Walk away now before you make a mistake you'll regret." The stocky man stepped forward as if ready to jump in, but the diner's manager rushed out from the kitchen, voice raised as he shouted that the police were on their way, and the threat of real consequences made both men hesitate. With a final glare at Daniel, they yanked themselves free and stormed toward the exit, slamming the door behind them as the room let out a collective sigh of relief. Silence lingered for a beat before scattered applause broke out from a few customers, but Daniel didn't bask in it. He turned instead to Emma, who stood trembling yet safe, her eyes glistening with gratitude as she whispered, "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in," and Daniel, glancing back at Lily who watched proudly from their booth, gave her a small reassuring smile and said, "You don't need to know, because I wasn't about to let it happen." The diner slowly returned to life after the confrontation, though the atmosphere still carried a hum of whispered conversations about what had just happened, and as Daniel guided Emma toward a chair to sit down, she wiped at her eyes quickly, embarrassed by her tears but unable to hide the mixture of relief and gratitude shining through them. Lily came bounding over from their booth, her little face lit with pride as she declared in her sweet, earnest voice, "My daddy's the bravest man in the world," making Daniel chuckle and ruffle her hair, though Emma's chest tightened at the words because to her, that was exactly how it felt, like a man had appeared out of nowhere to shield her when she needed it most. The manager offered apologies to Emma and assured her the men would be banned from returning, while other customers, now emboldened, murmured words of comfort and thanks to Daniel before finishing their meals. But for Daniel, the moment wasn't about being recognized, it was about showing Lily the importance of standing up for others, something he had promised himself he would teach her after her mother's passing, because the world could be harsh and cruel, and he wanted his daughter to know kindness and courage still mattered. Emma, though still shaken, returned to work with a steadier smile, bringing Daniel and Lily a stack of fresh pancakes on the house, though Daniel insisted on paying anyway, and when she placed the plate on their table, her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer, her voice soft but sincere as she whispered, "Thank you. I'll never forget this," words that carried a weight beyond simple gratitude, as though in that moment a fragile bond had been forged between them. Over the following weeks, Daniel and Lily found themselves visiting the diner more often, not because they craved pancakes, but because Emma's smile had begun to bloom again, brighter each time, her laughter slowly returning as the shadow of that night faded, replaced by the comfort of knowing she wasn't alone. Daniel noticed how Lily grew attached to her, often drawing little pictures to give Emma during their visits, and Emma, touched by the child's sweetness, pinned them proudly by the register, the simple exchange weaving threads of warmth between their lives. What had begun as a frightening night of humiliation for Emma and a tense dinner for Daniel and Lily transformed into something unexpected, the start of a friendship built on courage, compassion, and quiet acts of care, and though none of them could predict the future, it was clear to all three that their lives had shifted slightly on their axis, moving closer together. As Daniel walked Lily home that evening, the crisp night air carrying the scent of rain, she slipped her small hand into his and said, "Daddy, maybe Miss Emma can be our friend forever," and Daniel smiled, looking down at her before glancing back at the glowing diner sign, knowing deep down that sometimes the moments you never see coming, the ones where you choose to act instead of turn away, are the very ones that change everything.